room, doesn't want to be found, watch your gestures, But I wanted to let you know that, unfortunately, some of our executives here at Sacramento Association of Realtors are not going to be available, and they want to make sure that they are able to see this particular event. So I want to welcome all of you, and I'm glad that you came for this Lunch and Learn. Just to let you know that we've had this event 2 or 3 times over the last several years. The Housing Opportunity Committee has focused on providing information to our Realtor Committee members with the goal of helping you get more clients. If you didn't think that you could find financing into homes and you didn't know how to do it or they couldn't buy, that is why this series is called Show Me the Money. Let me say that again. Show me the money. Say it with me. Show me the money. There you go. Because there's always seems to be some way and another place to find the money. By the way, once the committee started turning over the ideals of current condominium markets and asking each other questions, we all seemed puzzled, by the way, and I know that probably came on your mind also. But in doing so, we questioned ourselves with a puzzled look. And this hit at a very timely topic. So we all had more questions and needed the answers. So I like to recognize the condo crew. Let me say it again, the condo crew that helped put this together, the subcommittee that helped put the program together itself. We like to say hey to Lynn Chanasborn, A.R. Cahey, Barbara Lebrecht, Dennis Landy, Linda Bennett, Sylvia Gomez, Wacky, and a special mention to Barbara because she's the one that came up with the con-dos and con-don'ts. So let's give them a round of applause. Now, I know you probably didn't see all those folks, so guess what? We're going to have them all stand real quick here. Next, I would like to introduce you to the rest of the committee, and we'll have everybody stand. Our chair, our committee chair, Scott Short. Andrew Palmer, Barbara Harsh, Bobby Glassel, Carlos Gutierrez, Charlene Stingley, Chris Little, David Whiteside, Joe Gleeman, Joseph Cunningham, Kim Roby, Kirk West, Larry Henderson, Mary Willett, and Pat Murphy. Wait a minute, I saw hands being raised. I want you to stand up so everybody knows who you are. Come on. It's good exercise, it gets the blood flowing. Thank you very much. As any of you know that we cannot do this at SAR without just great volunteers. And I mean really outstanding staff. They wanted me to say that, by the way, because they are. Outstanding. There's Janelle and there's Tony. Tony is behind the camera, so please be nice. Now for our panelists. Mr. Bruce Slaton, to my far left, is widely recognized not only for his expertise, but for his enthusiasm and willingness to share his knowledge. He is a life member of the Sacramento Association of Realtors Masters Club. Bruce has earned designations in real estate such as CRS, ABR, SRES, and ePro. Bruce considers his success in real estate as his ability to find the trends of the market and to try to master it for success. Mr. Bruce Slaton. Next, we have Brandi Schaefer. She is a senior mortgage officer with Safe Credit Union with more than 13 years of experience in the industry. Brandi has both been owned and has been an owner of a mortgage company and has worked for a leading institution where she was the top 1% performer. Brandi Schaefer. Now, Brad's runs all the way down here, so I'm just going to give you a short version of it. Mr. Brad Higgins right here has been involved in homeowner association management for more than 20 years, beginning with the Ohana Management Company in Hawaii. That was a tough job, I know. He joined AMC in 1991. He was named vice president in 1993 and president in 2025. Bruce At this point in time, let's make sure, well, no, I said Bruce, but I meant Brad. Brad, with that, let's give him a round of applause also. Now with this, at this point in time, we're going to have Bruce start us off. What are some of the challenges today, would you consider, Bruce, in the condo market, and how are you meeting them?
I think, testing, oh there. I think one of the main issue is financing, and agents basically not taking the time to figure out what's going on in the market. And of course, they rely on the listing agents most of the time, what they see in the MLS, which is probably the worst thing to do in the condo market. And so, of course, financing is the issue. Believing into the lender who will say, yeah, I'll do it, and then jeopardizing your client's money, getting to the fact where they go, oh, all of a sudden we can't do it. And those, at the end of the day, if they would have known the basic of the questions to ask in the very beginning, they probably would have been able to move on to a different complex and probably even have a successful sell. Some of the things we do, basically, we created the SacramentoCondos.com site as an education as well. That's why it's not branded our brokerage. Is basically showing people what to look for consumer-wise, realtor-wise, when looking at condos. What's the financing? What are the alternatives? What to ask for? Some of the main things right now, of course, is financing. Is there's more than some of the most common issues that we see in financing. Of course, is if there's more than 15% of the units in the complex or 30 days later or more on their HOAs, typically you're not going to be able to get Fannie or Fannie, Freddie, or HOA in the complex. If one single entity owns more than 10% of the units in the complex, that's another reason. The other one is that there's litigation in the complex, which is very common. The way I tell people most of the time is, if there hasn't been litigation in the complex, there's going to be. Because it's just a common thing. We're realtors, we prospect. Attorneys, they prospect. So once a unit goes from the builder to the HOA, I can almost guarantee you within a year or so there's going to be a lawsuit somewhere. And so it's not only if, it's going to be when. And typically those litigation issues are going to be usually structural. If it's somebody stubbed their toe and they sued the HOA, that's usually not generally going to affect the financing. But if it's an obsolete unit is another one. I don't know if anybody's seen the news 2 days ago for Timberlake, where they advertised condos are $28,000. So we got calls all day long that day where it said, oh, I want to buy a $28,000 condo in Timberlake. And I said, that's great. Do you have cash? And they said, well, no. Well, guess what? That's the other part of the story the media didn't want to say. Of course, Timberlake, they're one-bedroom units most of the time. There's a lot of water features in that complex. Correlation to lack of financing to the price of the condos is big. So the more, if you can't get financing, the prices are going to come down. Well, it becomes attractive to your client, and then you go and say, oh, I want to buy that $28,000 unit, and then what happens is you have to explain to them, one, investors own most of the units in there, there's maybe more rentals than there is homeowners, there could be an obsolete unit, and I know if we don't have if an appraiser can actually talk about it, but typically at Timberlake, for an appraisal, they want you to pull a similar unit outside of the complex as one of your comparables. Well, it's an obsolete unit. They don't have those units outside that complex typically, so it becomes an obsolete unit. It's a risk factor. And so the media is not going to tell you that. That goes to the realtor. The realtor needs to know, hey, I'm in a 300 square foot unit around an area, most units are 1,500 square feet. Let me talk to a lender who's closed in here. Check your MLS and see, did anything close for FHA in the last 7 years, or 2 years for that matter? And if it didn't, chances are you're not going to be the first to close an FHA in that complex. Of course, the other units, the other problem is owner-occupied versus tenant-occupied rates. Now, typically they need to be 51% owner-occupied. I did see a lender recently that said they want it to be 67%, and that was probably a portfolio for that lender. What I typically find is realtors who call me and say, or let's put it this way, media that calls me and says, Mr. Slaton, why isn't this complex, why are they anti-veteran? And I go, well, what makes you say that? Well, they don't take VA loans. They refuse to have VA loans. You have to get in the dialect of telling your clients, it's not that they don't accept them, it's that the unit's condition does not qualify for VA, FHA, or conventional. Because you tell the client that you can't use your VA in a condo complex because the HOA doesn't allow it, They're going to call Curtis, they're going to call the media, and the whole thing is you give them that information. And so most of the stuff I'm going to tell you today, of course, I tried to put out in a little newsletter that I did for an office recently, but it's not the end of your world. So let's say you go into a unit and there's no units available. Riva in West Sacramento, for instance. If it's not available, there's other alternatives. And people, we refer a lot of condominium leads out, and the agents will call me and say, oh, they wanted XYZ complex and they don't accept financing. And they're not my agents usually, so I have to call them back and say, yeah, but you lost that lead, but you could have sent them over to unit 1240, which was a home path listing, and you can buy in that complex. And they go, I didn't know that. So that's the one thing I would tell you in general is, if there's no financing available in a complex, but there's home path listings or there's HUD homes, go for those. You're going to most likely pay a premium, so keep that in your mind too. I've seen in some situations where a unit model match sells for, let's say, $110 because it has to be sold cash, but you go around the corner to a home path, exact same unit, and it sells for $130. Well, go for the $130 because the home path is not going to require the appraisal, and you're going to get in there into the complex. Now, I will tell you, some agents say, well, if you can't get financing in the complex, should you even recommend your client buy a condo there in the first place? It depends on the complex. If it's don't let litigation get in front of you. Litigation is going to happen. And so you have to look at the litigation, and you have to see the potential of the units. There is a direct correlation to the lack of financing and the pricing in the area. There was a foundation issue in a complex one a while back that went, the prices were probably $50,000 less than normal in that area. Once you solve the litigation issues, the appreciation usually happens, because the more buyers you can go to, the more people will buy in the complex. Riva's particular. Riva's incredible because you have the Davis factor, you have the school factor, you have the homeowner factor, and you have the affordability factor, but yet you don't have the financing. So if somebody tells you, I'm a lender and I can do financing in there, always ask them, how are you doing the financing? When Brandi did close a deal recently, the first thing I asked the agent was, okay, I'll give you a chance, no problem, but it always happens, she's going to tell me no. Brandi actually closed it early and on time, and everything went very smooth because it was a portfolio loan, and that's usually going to be the factor. If one agent says they can do a Fannie Mae in a complex, but everybody else can't do a Fannie, I can almost guarantee you that person's not going to be able to do the Fannie. And it happens. Your best friend's a lender, and he says, I can do it, and then 2 weeks later he says, oh, I can't. And your clients paid for the appraisal, they paid for their homeowner association stuff, and you name it, and now you're to blame. So that's an issue. The other things I would tell you too, and I know we're talking about financing, but also just some of the mentality of, should you even be showing in that complex? Is your client even ready for a condo? Some of the things I was trying to tell people early on, and it happens a lot more in Nevada than it does in California. I think we don't have as many tabloid stuff here. Keep me on time, by the way, because I'm not watching the clock. But what happens is, pay attention to the rules in the complex. Call an agent before you write an offer in a complex. Some of the things I typically ask people when they call me on the phone, number one when they want a condo is, what's your financing? That's going to really kill all kinds of complexes, or it's not. How long are you going to live in the unit? And they say, well, it might be transferred next year. I might stay there for a year and then rent it out. Well, that prompts me to say, well, just so you know, the complex has a rental restriction. So that's going to be an issue next year, okay? You may not want your client in that complex, because if they get transferred next year and they can't rent it in the complex, it may lead to a foreclosure because they have no other options. Now, of course, there's been laws that have been passed in January that the rental restriction needs to be in place before, if you bought the unit and the rental restriction was not in place before you bought it, then you're not bound by it. But don't get in the habit. As a listing agent, I would tell you, ask your client, is there a rental restriction? Is there a pet restriction? Ask for the crazy stuff, okay? And I'll say ask for the crazy stuff because you learn by experience. These days I ask people, does your boyfriend, does your significant other, do your relatives, do people that visit you have a motorcycle? And they say, well, no. Well, or yes. I'll say, I'll tell you what, you're looking in Woodside. You don't buy in Woodside. Or tell your boyfriend to sell his motorcycle. Because you got to understand something. You're signing as the owner of that complex that that unit, that you will abide by the rules. Well, there is a rule in Woodside that your motorcycle will be towed if it's inside the gates. And the first thing you're going to hear from most of your clients is, oh, they can't do that. Well, guess what? They can. And so when your car gets towed, you're going to realize it. Now, we had a client who he read the rules and regulations and said, you know, I have a pickup truck, but I have a camper shell on it. And most of the HOAs don't go by the visual part of your vehicle. They go by what the Department of Motor Vehicles categorizes it at. And like in Woodside, if it's an open bed pickup, it's not allowed. And even if it has a shell on it. Now the client, he was fully disclosed, and he said, you know, Bruce, I believed you, and you know, they sent me a violation notice. He goes, I'm going to sell the truck. He wanted Woodside more than the truck. But that's something that potentially could turn into a lawsuit if you didn't let them know that. The one thing I asked him, do you have pets? Okay. One of the things that came out in the news today, which I'm sure will eventually be something we'll have to disclose, is the use of service animals with miniature horses. Okay. Well, remember the horse, you know, you can't preclude rentals. You know, you can't preclude, what do you call it, the service dogs inside a house. Well, one of the debates going on today is miniature horses, you know, as service animals. And that becomes an issue too. It sounds crazy. It's in the news today. It's on my Facebook page if you're there. But anything you see with service animals could affect, you know, the units as well. So the other thing I'd tell you to do is never say, don't go around and ask the neighbors, do they ever enforce those rules, okay? I have a Great Dane. And the neighbor's going to say, nah, nobody ever cares, don't worry about it. Well, guess what? Betty, who's next door, is 99 years old. She doesn't really care, but you know what? She passes on next year, okay? And her son takes up the unit. He doesn't really like you that much, and he finds out that you have a Great Dane. He has a copy of the rules. You have an issue on your hand, okay? Murphy's Law says if you're going to ask, do they ever enforce it? They will eventually. Some of the common things that I see issues going on in complexes, and I put them on here as common violations and rules that are out of the norm, because you have to ask those questions. And the only way you can ask those questions, by the way, is basically look at the rules and regulations in detail, read it line by line, and have your client read it line by line. You know, we know they read their loan documents line by line and figure by figure, but if anything I would tell them is they need to retake this thing, focus on it at night, highlight what is concerns of theirs, talk to the HOA before they close that deal. Some of the things, of course, is no motorcycles. That's actually, I call it a rarity because it happens in just a few of the complexes, but it does happen. Woodside's one of them. No pets over 30 pounds. Now, somebody has told me before that some complexes have a no pit bull policy. I don't believe you can actually say no pit bull. I believe they probably have poundage. That's what they use at the pounds. And so trash left out after the trash pickup, I see that quite often. You go through a complex, pickups on Monday, Friday the trash can's still out, and that's usually going to be a common violation I see. Satellite dishes improperly anchored to the exterior. Garages used for something other than parking. I've actually been in some of the tandem unit garages, and they have an office in the garage, and I go, oh, that's going to be an issue. And then the owner says, nobody's ever said anything, and I say, has anybody ever seen it? Okay. I remember walking into a condo unit, as from a buyer standpoint, if you go, oh my gosh, this is a great second-story unit on top of another unit with the granite floors, but everything else has carpet. Well, if it doesn't look like the rest of the units in that complex, see if it's even allowed. Because I've walked into some units, and the remnants are still there. You just put wood flooring in over the great carpet, past the great carpet, and I go, that's incredible. Can you do that in this complex? And I'm a passive-aggressive when it comes to clients, to get them to answer the question to me. And you go, well, nobody ever said anything. Did you ever ask? And of course, I had to sell the unit. So I said, well, go ask the HOA before you put it on the market. HOA said, no, you're not. Because keep in mind, most of the current condos being built were built very noticing the space. And so the carpet that they put above that single-story unit was put there usually for noise. And again, that's another lawsuit that you normally see in some of the units is noise issues. Well, if you take out the extra padded carpet and put tile counter or tile flooring, you're going to actually amplify the noise. Okay, and so those are things to look. If you see something out of the place, ask the question. Some of the other thing too, your lender's condo certifications. Agents will call me all the time and say, do you have a condo cert that you used from the last transaction on that unit? We want to save some money. Well, the way I see it is, no, I wouldn't want to give that to you even if I had it, because the condo cert needs to, in my eyes, needs to come directly from the HOA to the lender so there's no fraud involved. Because sometimes I've seen in some units, a unit got sold, and it definitely sold conventional, and I know conventional is not available in the complex, or something weird happens, and then come to find out later on, that somebody committed fraud and altered the condo cert, okay? And so, in my eyes, I would never even get involved in the condo cert from a listing agent standpoint. I would allow that only between the lender and the HOA. Now, I may say, yeah, I know that there's litigation in the complex, or I know that the complex has a rental restriction, but I would not want to touch the condominium certification. So, talk about insurance when we talk to buying a condo. I know your lender's not going to require insurance in some cases, but I want you to keep this in mind that's happening in some of the complexes. Let's talk about water damage, which is, in my eyes, the biggest issue you have in insurance. If you're going to have a buyer buy a property, a condo, and they say, oh, I only have to get a renter's insurance policy that maybe covers my personal property. What I would always tell you to do is get an additional water damage rider on any insurance policy that you get in any condo today. And the reason why is that's usually going to be the issue. A pipe bursts in your unit and it affects 3 other units. You're going to probably be responsible for those 3 other units. I will tell you what happens is some of the HOAs, if the pipe that burst goes to your unit only, and it causes damage to somebody else's unit, you're probably responsible for it. If it's a general, if it goes to multiple units, maybe the HOA covers it. But don't think that the HOA covers it. There's a situation now in one of the complexes where a pipe burst in another unit's garage. Well, not only is the homeowner, the condo owner, responsible for the repair damage for the plumbing in the other garage, they're responsible for everything associated with it as well. She says, why doesn't the HOA cover it? Well, in the bylaws, it depends on if that pipe goes to your unit only. And so, always ask the insurance company when you're talking to them. I think AARP includes it additionally. What else can I add for water damage? Because if there's anything I would add on a condo unit, it would be water damage. Because otherwise you could be, $45,000, $50,000 damage, and it could be the difference between you and nobody else covering it. So let's see, termite reports. If one unit has a unit in a building, let's say you have the 4 units, that are connected. If one unit has a termite issues, and you tell your client, I'm going to close it, everybody else will cover it, you're going to have issues. Because most of the time, in my experience, what a termite company will say is for the guarantee to happen, if we treat one unit, we have to treat all 4 units. And the other units are typically going to say, why do I care? I don't want to do it. Then your client's going to come back to you and say, but the HOA doesn't cover the termite, and the other units don't want to do it. You're going to give me some of your commission. And so that typically happens. So keep in mind that know what the HOA covers. Okay, don't assume they cover the roof. Don't assume they cover the exterior. I mean, even though we know they probably do cover the exterior, don't assume it. Call and ask. Get something in writing if you can. Don't believe what's in the MLS. People click the buttons thinking they know, and then you're paying for somebody else's problems. Let's see. Read the agenda minutes carefully when you get those agenda minutes, because those agenda minutes will give you an idea of what's been going on in the complex for the last 6 to 8 months. Okay. Well, I'll tell you real quick. I had a condo in Santa Cruz. My client loved it. It was on the cliff on West Cliff. I love this view of the ocean, and I said, let's get the minutes. And it looked like some investors were trying to control the complex. So I don't feel comfortable with this, and I convinced them to buy one a little further down. A year later, client calls me because she knew about it more than I did and said, hallelujah, thank you so much, I love you to death. And I said, why? She says, they tore down the complex I was going to buy last time. The investors are going to rebuild it. They took control of most of the units, and they tore the whole thing down, and now it has to be rebuilt or something like that. And it was a crisis averted. Pay attention to the minutes especially. It'll usually tell you things like, is a rental restriction coming up? Are they having issues with the reserves? Are they facing a lawsuit or something going on? One of the things I was going to say is, when we created SacramentoCondos.com is, that's probably not going to work. But anyway, you got it? No. When we created SacramentoCondos.com, because I get a lot of calls for the HOA companies, who they are, that kind of stuff, condo certs, condo-wise, that kind of stuff. What I do is on the right-hand side of SacramentoCondos.com, we created about 6 years ago, what I did was I put links to the Homeowners Association information. That's for generally who are some of the most prominent homeowners associations in Sacramento. Condo cert, most lenders you have to get. Some of the complexes you have to get the docs through condo certs, or what is it, condo wise docs, I believe. And you go on there and you can get the information there. The complex FHA status. Can you go on there and see if that complex has an FHA status? If it doesn't work, just go on later. No big deal. But anyway, there's links on there for that. The one thing I tell you is ask questions, okay? And then don't expect so much from the HOAs. The HOAs have privacy issues with the current owners. So if you're Joe Blow calling up and saying, you know what, how many units are in that unit, who owes what money, they don't know who you are. And then the last thing I'll tell you real quick, and again, email me if you ever have questions about condos. I can usually tell you what I found. But one of the things, the last thing that I'll tell you if you're a buyer on a short sale in a condominium, okay, what I would tell you is if they're more than 2 or 3 months behind on their HOA fees, don't assume that it's 2 or 3 months behind on their HOA fees that should be on the HUD. If it's 6 months behind and it says they're $1,000 behind, you have to assume it's been charged off to a collection agency. And so what I find commonly happens, and people call me all the time, is they go, oh my gosh, you know what, the HOA was only owed $1,000, but then they upped it to $2,000 when we went to go close. And I go, no they didn't. You never even bothered to ask if it got charged off to Allied or so, and Allied's fees are probably going to be pretty consistent with what was currently, if it's owed $1,000, when it goes to Allied, it's probably going to be owed $2,000. And so all of a sudden they're looking to the buyer to come up with the extra $1,000. And so on a condo, it's definitely where I would ask for a copy of the HUD during the short sale process. What did you submit to the lender? Just so I know that there was a collection fee on there, that the Allied was on there, and that kind of thing. And again, if you're a listing agent calling, you need to say, has this been charged off to a collection agency? Who is that collection agency? And then see if you can tell the listing agent, can you please get a statement from a collection agency? One of the other things I would tell you, let's see, the satellite dish, what is the pool and the weight room policy in regards to the friends and visitors? That happens a lot. So find out what the rules and regulations are. But anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Brandi now. And so if you have any questions, save it to the end.
Hi, thank you very much.
Excuse me just a second, Brandi, before you speak. Could we have all of our well-behaved realtors turn off their cell phones for us, please? And those that are not well-behaved, just turn them off. Okay, we appreciate that. We don't want the interruptions in between the speakers. Thank you very much, Brandi. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I'm Brandi Schaefer. I work at Safe Credit Union. I've been doing financing for actually over 15 years. The reason I had met Bruce was because we're doing a lot of portfolio on different complexes that most people aren't financing at all. Fannie Mae has a very limited amount of properties that are approved. Safe will do all the financing on certain projects. It is an exception. On the Riviera, we got 20%, so we are allowed to finance up to 20% of the whole project, which most properties or lenders out there will not do. So in order for us to go ahead and qualify a client, we have to get an exception. It takes about 24 to 48 hours. Typically, we ask that 20% down. We're not going to go over 20% down on an owner-occupied property, 25 to 20% down on a non-owner-occupied property. The only hit to the rate is actually 0.25% to the fee, nothing to the rate. So their rate stays the same. We pretty much only do fixed rates, no adjustables, 30-year fixed. If they own more than 4 properties, we're going to ask that they put it on a 15-year term if they have 4 properties with us financed. Typically, we keep about $100 million on the books at all times, and we don't sell all of our loans to Fannie Mae. We don't do Freddie Mac loans. We do FHA, but we don't do, obviously, any condos that are FHA. Our underwriting typically is we're about 20 to 25 days for a purchase. To get an exception, to get a complex approved, it takes me about 24 to 48 hours. It helps if I find out about the HOA, how many is owner-occupied, how many, in the complex, if there's any pending litigations. Obviously, there's a pending litigation in the Riviera. We've overcome it because there's no health and safety issues. It is a dispute between the builder and, obviously, the complex right at this point, but no health and safety. Minimum loan's about $50,000. I can go lower than that. I prefer not. Newer complexes, nothing that is 50 years old that's been converted. It will not clear. I think that's pretty much it. Right now, our interest rates are at 4%. We're doing a lot of the HARP loans. I would say typically our business is picked up in the last year because we're probably one of the largest in financing right now with the best rates in the Sacramento area. I don't know anybody that really can beat us. I think that's it. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hey, I'll stand so I can see the other half over here.
Thank you, Brad.
Sure. So my name is Brad Higgins. I'm the president of AMC. We've been in business for 20 years managing homeowners associations. I did it for 10 years in Hawaii, and hopefully I can, where the tire hits the road, be of help to you today. Let's start with some really basics that Bruce just mentioned. Let's go through the three things in condos are pets, parking, and people. We call them the 3 Ps. So let's start with pets again. Bruce just mentioned that.
Put the mic down.
Sure. Too loud?
No, your podium's off.
Oh, thank you. There we go. Better yet? Thank you. So let's start with pets again. First of all, Bruce had mentioned look through the rules. In a homeowners association, you have your CC&Rs, your bylaws, and your articles. The CC&Rs are the covenants, conditions, and restrictions within that none of you are going to read. It puts me to sleep at night. But I know that the rules are a summary of those restrictions. If there's anything you want to look at, you want to look at those rules because they're going to help you in these 3 areas. First of all, pets. I have a number of associations now that have outlawed pit bulls, Doberman Pinschers, and the like. You've probably seen on the news. The little girl got bit by a pit bull that was running loose, paralyzed half of her face. It's a serious incident in a lot of associations. You're going to need to look in those rules to see whether they have restrictions on dogs. Otherwise, your owner buys in. It's their family member. It's the pet that they've always had. It's a pit bull. And then they get upset at you and come back to me because I'm saying, no, you can't have pit bulls on the property or the Doberman. So please read them regarding pets. Let's go for parking. Parking. A lot of the CC&Rs say you can have 2 cars of which they have to be parked in the garage, not even in the driveways. Your owners buy in, they have 4 cars. Their kids are going to have a car within a year. And they're parking in the driveway, they're parking in visitor, and all of a sudden they're in a confrontational relationship with the board of directors and they're fined. Be sure you look in the rules once again. The rules will be a summary. They'll tell you 2 cars of which have to be parked in the garage at all times. No exceptions on that. Real important to keep your clients happy and their expectations after having moved in line with proper dog, proper cars. Let's go back to people. People in regards to rental restrictions. I have a number of associations that have rental restrictions. Usually when I see the signs up, a lot of times I have my property managers call the realtors to say, are you aware there's rental restrictions in here? For you to have an investor in here is inappropriate. A number of them have 15, 20% restrictions, and maybe they're right at it, but you want to be aware that there's rental restrictions. On the condo certs that you receive, it'll say rental restrictions on there. That's an extremely important aspect to stay in line. I've had a lot of interesting things, board meeting just last month. A realtor came in and said, this is going to be a caretaker in the house in the transition between when the owner moves in, and therefore, can we not use it as a rental? They're going to move in within 6 months. They're looking at all kinds of facets like that. This board denied that request. Other boards that I have say, you know what, the economy is such, Brad, that we should make an exception to the rental restrictions. Now, as a board, we want to allow more rentals just so we can get the income coming back in from the lost dues. So I have some boards that are considering that as a variance clause within their rental restrictions. Do consider that. That's an open possibility. Okay, that's pets, parking, and people really quick. I asked my accounting department, what are the issues that come to mind when realtors call? First of all, you either call my accounting department, or in other management companies, you call the accounting or you call customer service. Probably not the individuals that are going to get you the information that you need. The person that you need to contact is the property manager. That's the individual that'll know the rules regarding the 3 items I just mentioned. That's the individual that'll know the insurance requirements. By the way, never assume the responsibility of being an insurance agent and tell them what the coverages are. Always refer them back to the association's agent or their own personal insurance agent. Let them make the decisions. If you, I had an owner come in before a board just a week ago and said, my agent said I didn't need a personal homeowner's policy. He had a flood in the unit. It did flood into the next door unit. He wasn't aware there was a $5,000 deductible that he was responsible for. By the way, in homeowners associations, I just hit an all-time high, a $50,000 deductible in an HOA. You think that needs to be disclosed to potential buyer? Big time in terms of how they procure their own HO6 policy, their own personal homeowners policy. Extremely important for them to get coverage for association deductibles that range from $5,000 to $10,000, $50,000. That's huge. Anyway, go back and have them refer back to the association's insurance agent. Let that professional answer their questions as to what kind of coverage they need in the unit for water damage, deductibles, improvements and embetterments. If there's parquet flooring in there, something above and beyond what was originally installed. They'll answer those questions for them. Other things, let's see, my accounting department came up with a list. They always have a lot of fun with this. We talked about insurance here a little bit. Budgets, electrical bills, what's covered under the association's dues? You'll ask that quite frequently. Your owners are going to ask. There again, only the property manager is going to be intimately aware of the association to know that it's the garbage is covered because they're large bins, but you're responsible for the water, and you're aware that most of them are now individually metered, so the owners are responsible for the water costs. But it's important to go back to the property manager in order to get the specific information as to some of my associations. They're all apples and oranges. No two are identical in what they cover. So don't assume that. Go to the property manager, ask them what the dues cover. Find that particular individual to get the answers to your questions regarding insurance, coverage, rules that we just talked about on pets, parking, and people. Short sales. I was at a board meeting last night. Owner's $6,000 delinquent. The realtor comes to me and says, Brad, will they accept more? Will they accept more? Will they accept less? There we go. And he sends me an email and says, will they accept a $2,500 offer? I said, I'll take that to the board. Boards of directors are made up of obviously owners like you and I. Some of them have backgrounds in real estate, many of them don't. Some of them, as in the one last night, simply said, no, we're not going to accept the $2,500 offer. They're $6,000 delinquent. We'll waive the late fees and interest. Usually you can get the property managers to work with you on that capacity. We want $5,700, Brad. We've paid our dues all along the line. Why should we waive any of their dues? That's one philosophy. Another one, though, is you got $2,500 in the hand, and if you allow them to be foreclosed on, I tell them the likelihood is you're going to get wiped out. We will lose all of that. And there are collection agencies that I deal with in town, the half a dozen of them, tell them the same thing. But some of them don't want to comply with that. They would rather just let it go to foreclosure and lose the offer that you just put on the table for $2,500, like the meeting I went to last night. Others will say, yes, accept the $2,500, or come back and counteroffer, Brad, see if they'll go up to $3,000. So it's depending upon the boards. It's depending upon their philosophy, how they feel about accepting your offers on short sales. It's a delicate tightrope with boards of directors, depending upon their personalities and how they run their businesses. Each one runs them a little differently. The condo cert that you just mentioned on sometimes using somebody else's condo cert from 6 months ago or 12 months ago, don't do that. If a lawsuit's been filed and you've got a condo cert that says no pending lawsuit, and now I've filed a lawsuit 6 months later, you haven't disclosed the proper information to that owner and you're not aware of it. It's worth them paying the dollars for the condo cert to make sure you have up-to-date information. I wouldn't rely upon past information 6, 12 months ago. That could be crucial. There's 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Let me see if there's anything else left on budgets. Condo do's, condo don'ts. It's a fascinating world out there. It changes all the time. The laws change. So if I can be of help, don't hesitate. Either come up to me, I'll give you my card, email me. Always willing to help you ask a question. Thank you very much, or answer a question.
That was great, wasn't it? Yeah. You can get more enthusiasm than that. That was great. Come on. These guys came out here, hard work and everything else at that time.
Take the mic for questions.
Now, I know that you got a lot of valuable information. I see the hands popping up already. So we're not even going to try to do a summation on this. We're just going to let you answer your questions. But, you know, you've gotten an opportunity to listen to some of the experts in the business in reference to homeowners association and how it works and some of the pitfalls that we have dealing with some of the short sales and different situations we run into. You also found out there are some folks that still finance condos and things of this nature. We just have to make sure we present the proper package for them. And of course, with Bruce here, he's given us so much insight on how and what we need to do to make sure that we're getting and doing this business and doing it the proper way. So with that, at this time, we're going to open it up for Q&A. Questions and answers at this point in time, and
You have to wait until I get there with the microphone.
Right, we have our roving mic. Janelle will come to you. She'll be at the speed of light, but at the same time, we want to make sure we give everyone an opportunity to ask a question. So, with that, panelists, are you ready for all these questions? All right, with that, first question, go ahead, Janelle.
Are we live? Yes. Go ahead, Ann.
Hi. Thank you all for coming. It was a really great discussion. The first thing I'd like to go back and start, could somebody define a condo and the difference between that and a planned unit development? There are some places that have homeowners associations, but they're not condos. And we've been dealing with MetroList even in listings, because sometimes they'll go and appraise the whole thing and deny our loan, and they'll say, well, it's a condo. And we say, no, it's a planned unit development, single-family attached residence. Also, flood insurance and blanket flood insurance. And the other thing that I would mention to the realtors, the last condo cert I got with all the minutes, it wasn't all there. So I had my client read everything she did. She had 6 months of minutes rather than 12. So just a heads up on that.
Who would like to answer on that, Bruce or Brad? Okay. There's a mic just right there if you like.
So regarding the...
Is it on?
Is it on? Testing, 1, 2, 3?
Yeah. Yes.
The difference between a PUD and a condominium. It's difficult in the CC&Rs. You're not going to be able to probably find that. The difference between a condominium and a PUD, in a condominium, the owner owns the airspace within the unit. So the association then is responsible for the plumbing that services all of those units. Generally, they're responsible for termite eradication and treatment. So I build that into the budgets within those associations to address that. Whereas in a PUD, the owner owns the basic structure of the building. The association may have responsibility for the roof, but the underlying structure, the plumbing that services their unit is the owner's responsibility. So there's actually a substantial difference in the budgeting between planned unit development and a condominium. The best thing there again is very few of them are true condos. Out of the 50 or so that I manage, only maybe 2 of them are true condominiums. Even though they say condominium plot map and the like, you need to refer to the documents in order to get the definition of condo versus a PUD. Refer back to your property managers. I know it's a difficult one, but most of them should be able to answer that question on the given association you're working on.
Great. Did that answer your question? No, go ahead, Bruce.
Tony, can you turn this on when you have a chance? One of the things I would tell you to do is, like on our Sacramento condo site, on the right-hand side it says FHA approval, or is it FHA complex? And my experience is that the PUDs do not show up underneath the FHA link that the condos do. And so if you, like, say, put in 95758, it's probably going to pull up the what in HUD's eyes is a condominium unit and not a PUD. Because, like, when I pull up 95758, it only shows up as the 5 condominium units, whereas I know there's probably about another dozen PUDs in that same zip code. That's the way I look at it. So.
Great. Hopefully that answers the question. We have another. Oh, go ahead.
Judy's next.
Judy?
Well, this is kind of in line with the difference between the PUD and the condo. This is for Brandi. Since an attached PUD is not a condo, would you require a condo cert? No, that's the good answer. We like that answer. And then, along the same lines, do the occupancy and arrearages rates apply when it's an attached PUD for your underwriting?
I haven't had any experience that it has affected any of them. I've done some PUDs out towards Folsom, or actually it was along the river, and it did not affect it at all. The appraisal, we don't require condo certs on even condos. We look at the appraisal. If the appraiser can't get the information from the homeowners association, then we'll require a condo cert. But I haven't had any experience where they have even treated a condo and a PUD the same. We don't consider them the same, and we actually will sell them to Fannie Mae, or we'll portfolio them, but it's not an exception.
Thank you.
Let me kind of add to that real quick so you know where to find that link at. So on our site, on the Sacramento condo site, on the right-hand side, we put complex FHA status, and when you click that, it'll take you to HUD's website. And so what you do is I just put the zip code because you just never really know what the name of the complex is in their list. And so that's what you would pull up, let's say in 95758. And then it'll actually tell you, Enhanced 2 will also tell you if it's an approved complex. It'll give you a lot of information. How many units are in the complex it'll usually give you. But here, if you click on like the Bighorn condominiums, there's Boardwalk, you can see it'll only pull up condominiums. It doesn't pull up any of the PUDs in 95758 in regards to HUD, so they don't consider them what the difference is. That's my easiest way of doing it. So.
Yeah, for those that haven't used this is a great link, so make sure you probably play around with it so you can get familiar with it.
Just don't think that it's the Bible.
That's
because
right.
Whatever you see on here, you're arguing with the lender and saying, oh no, it says it's approved.
Gotcha.
Well, it also means that there's other criteria as well, so talk to the lender.
Gotcha.
Hey, I have two questions. What's the magic way to get minutes, which never come with the package generally? And then the second thing is, if I look at the reserves in a financial statement, how do I know if it's enough?
There's a reserve study.
Wow, that's a good one. First of all, on the minutes, there again, if you contact the property managers, it's very easy for them to email 12 sets of minutes. Should be a real simple project for them. I don't know if they're customer service department. I know when you call, you'll say, isn't there somebody else in the office that can help me? You know, the property managers are generally out in the field half day. They're doing on-site inspections at those homeowners associations, so they're in the office half day. But in this case, maybe customer service could help by just emailing the minutes. That's quite common. Boy. So reserves are an important aspect of any budget that you have to disclose to owners. I have to disclose it annually along with their operating expenses. I have to disclose what the reserves are. We have reserve study specialists. You probably know Bob Browning in town. They give us a document that there's 4 or 5 pages that go out as a disclosure, and it tells them what percentage they're funded. You know, in some, in Hawaii and the like, there's certain percentage requirements to meet that. Here, there isn't. Matter of fact, you don't even really have to. There's no law currently saying you have to fund it. But is it prudent? Is it fiduciary responsibility? You better believe it, because they have to put on new roofs, siding, painting, and paving, and plaster. So there isn't a requirement there. Your question, I just had a realtor say, I want the year-end review. And I said, actually, I don't have a problem with you talking to the CPA. and getting their estimation of the financial condition of the association. I gave them that opportunity.
I remember back like at 86 or 7, when there were all these condos and they didn't have any reserves, and the state came in and required it. They had to do a study, and suddenly everybody's dues went sky high because they had to fund all these reserves because they were way behind.
Absolutely.
And you
Well,
say there isn't any?
there's a requirement to have a reserve study. It's not a requirement to fund it. So in Hawaii, 20%. Here, there's no requirement. But as I just said, it's their fiduciary responsibility to fund it in order to meet the needs of the association for roofing, painting, siding, paving. I tell them, that's so. Refer that one back again to the expert, the reserve study specialist. If they want to talk to that individual, let them talk to the likes of a Bob Browning, or let them speak with the CPAs. The CPAs that we use in town don't charge to have an owner call and say, are they financially solvent? I see that they're having to pay back their reserves because they borrowed money. I see that they have accounts payable that are equivalent to 5 months worth of their dues. They must have some liquidity problems.
Great.
CPAs will answer that.
Right. And by the way, Brad, do you have Browning's number so that they can make that call?
393-0600.
There you go.
Okay.
One of the things I was going to say too is one of the best HOAs that I've found in Sacramento, for Mike when I want to be nosy, is Woodside Association. So sometimes look to see if the association has a website. Woodside does, and the beauty about Woodside is they list all of their just got documents and forms right there. And of course, so all that stuff that you usually need is right there. See? CCNRs, Articles of Incorporation, you name it. So they're one of the other ones. But one of the other things get in the habit of doing is too is, on the right-hand side, we put Condo Cert. We're going to add one for Wise Docs, because Wise Docs is another company people are using. But sometimes if you go to Condo Certs here, and you go right, homeowners, click here. I'm looking at my screen while I'm looking there. So on here it says homeowner sign up. So sometimes where it says order individual association documents, you can go in and you can put the name of the complex. And I think I think Campus Commons is in here. But you put Campus Commons, and let's say California, and see if it goes there. It says Sacramento. So what it'll do is it'll tell you when it comes up. There. So there's the two complexes that are available on Campus Commons. So that means that this HOA manages everything, their documents off of Condo Certs. So if you click on Condo Cert there, it'll tell you all of the different prices of the different packages, and you can order it here beforehand. And if it's going to be, let's say, the laws or the Articles of Incorporation, something you need, the annual board minutes, that kind of stuff, it may be worth the $25 before you write an offer. But the one thing too is, if under the fee disclosure documents, which is 0, you see there, and you purchase it, and I think you just put Bruce. Let's see, Bruce. And then what it'll do is it'll actually tell you, what is included. There you go. So it'll tell you everything that's going to be included in that package that comes across and what's not included. So what does this tell me right here? If I ordered this because I want to know about the litigation, and you see down here where it probably says there's litigation there somewhere, preliminary list of defects. All these things are not included. That means maybe I need to go to a different resource. Who's the attorney? Listing agent? What is that? And the other company too, one is called Condo Certs. The other company is called HomeWise Docs, and I believe Brad's company uses HomeWise Docs.
Gotcha.
And so, there you go.
Great information. Do we have another question?
Actually, my question was about the reserve studies. I tried to get an association approved for FHA a couple years ago, and FHA required the reserve study, and I sent it to them, and then they said they denied it because it didn't have 100% funded. So kind of on the same question, you said that, in Hawaii is 20% of the funding. What do you see as the norm around here? And then I kind of wanted to comment on the question about the difference between a PUD and a condo. The basic difference, the technical difference between the two of them, by the way, is dirt. With a condominium, you do not own the dirt. All of the land is owned by the association. With a PUD, you actually own a lot. And so that is the difference. You talked about the differences from a practical standpoint. I happen to know one up at Lake Tahoe at North Star where there's condominiums and the person who owns the condo is responsible for everything because they look like single-family homes where the dirt is actually owned by the Forest Service. But they're actually condominiums. condominiums up there at, so don't necessarily look at the structure. It's actually if there's a dirt or a thing. But I'd like your response on the reserve study.
So that's in regards to the FHA requirements on reserve studies. I was at a conference in Los Angeles 6 months ago, and they've changed their requirements since then. They're an ever-evolving scenario, not only what percentage of owner occupancy, and how many, boy, that's a good one. They want the delinquencies starting at 30 days. My gosh, my delinquencies look terrible at 30 days, but at 90 days, they're looking a lot better, right? So it depends. The FHA is coming up with new requirements. You guys probably know them better than I. You deal with that entity. But I really can't answer that specifically as to what the requirements are currently. They were playing hardball a while back to where it was almost impossible to meet their requirements, is what I could see when I was down in Los Angeles. I think they've softened up some since then, hopefully.
Any others? Any other questions?
Hi, this question is for Brandi. Brandi, I'm not sure if I understood you. You are doing condo loans on approved projects, or are you approving them yourself?
We're approving them ourselves. So as you know, most projects aren't Fannie Mae or FHA approved. So what we do is we portfolio them, and we will not sell them to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or FHA. We will actually keep them in-house. So that gives us the ability to do financing that nobody else will.
That's great.
Very good. Thank you.
Very good.
And just so you know, I wasn't a believer. I told the agent, yeah, okay, give it a week. They'll tell me it's not doable. And about, I don't know, it seemed like it was just 2 weeks later or so, somebody was telling me we're ready for docs. And I said, I didn't even know we were that close. But, so everybody who knows me knows I don't recommend people, unfortunately, who, but yeah, I was very surprised when they closed. So and I can tell you that buyer probably saved, I mean, if you take the difference between that and, maybe a home path, probably saved a good $15,000 by just going with doing their research.
I've done 9 loans in that one particular complex, and I've been allotted 20% of that complex I can finance.
How can we find out which complexes are approved by SAFE? Do you have a website?
Well, what happens is each is individual, because obviously it depends on the borrower. Because if the borrower is strong enough, even if we don't like the complex, we'll make that exception because based on them.
Okay.
So on his particular client, he was not very strong. I mean, he was strong, but he wasn't strong. He was new at his job. He did meet at 20% down, but we had already financed in that complex. We felt secure because his credit was so high. So there was some goods and bads about the whole thing. There is that pending litigation. We overlooked that. So each, depending on the complex and the severity of the client, is depending on if it's going to get approved.
Okay. So what you're saying then is that we should bring our particular clients to you, and then you'll do the scenario.
Correct.
Okay. Great.
This thing with the PUD just came through to me when FHA came up with this thing. For years, I lived in Roundtree in Greenhaven, and every time I sold in there, and FHA would make an exception because it wasn't listed. They've been a PUD since they were built. And so I made this comment to one of the lenders, and she said, oh, well, if they're a PUD, there's no problem. And suddenly, everyone now is copying, because they know I've sold in there and lived in there for so long. Now they are putting in there that this is a PUD. It is not a condo. That is such a misconception because we use that word for both places. And I think educating the public and everybody on the difference is huge. And you can see that with financing.
Right. So. A PUD built by the same builder at the same time in the exact same structure, and one's a condo, one's a PUD. They just set up the ownership different.
But ours clearly state that it's planned unit development, always was.
Always
so all those years I struggled.
Okay, let's make sure we're going to the roving mic. Thank you. Any more questions?
Well, I would just make a comment.
I would just make the comment that MLS does not distinguish between a PUD and a condo. So we're just there to guess.
No, we put it in the remarks.
in the remarks.
Yeah, you put it in.
Wouldn't it be nice to be able to search by that?
We have one more question, looks like. This should wrap up our last question, looks like.
Sandy, we had that issue, and we have addressed that with Dave Howe and Bill Miller, and they know that there's no way to just show, like in Campus Commons, it's not really a condo, because that's where our issue happened when they disallowed our short sale, because it was they said it was a condo, and we said, well, no, it just has to go into MLS as a condo, but it's really not a condo. So they're going to fix that the next time they change whatever they do at MLS. They know about that. Hopefully they have a committee, there's an MLS committee, and they're working on that issue so that we can separate the planned unit developments from the condos, and that'll be easier to get the loans on the different ones.
Great. Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say, we don't really have a condo training program. We really don't. But the closest thing we do have is, and we took it, there was, I think, 10 of us in the class last time it was offered here in Sacramento, was the Certified CID Specialist. I put the URL on the back of the newsletter. I would tell you the class is when you go through the whole reserves thing and what's required of HOAs, it's very boring. But I will tell you it's very enlightening to figure out what's required of HOAs and management companies and that kind of thing. The other thing I would add, too, is a lot of people say, I'm going to report that HOA to Department of Real Estate. Keep in mind, the Department of Real Estate doesn't really, for the most part, regulate HOAs. It's really essentially kind of the Department of Corporations and Attorney General. And so a lot of times, the only time the Department of Real Estate's involved is the initial marketing and approval of the complex. If there's misrepresentation, maybe they'll get involved. But also know who oversees. We don't have as many issues as they do in Nevada, because we have the Davis-Sterling Act. Definitely check up the Davis-Sterling Act if you want to specialize in condos. Just get familiar with it so you know where it is. It has a great URL. I think it's called davis-sterling.com, and it has the entire act on there, and they update it pretty much within a week or two of the new laws. Gives everything from the what allowed American flags, what's allowed for rentals, that kind of stuff. It's a great thing to read when you have nothing else to do. So
great.
It's Davis, D-A-V-I-S, and then I think it's Sterling is STIRLING.com. There's one attorney that's really done a great job on a website. If you put it in, he'll show it up. We actually started putting components of the Davis-Sterling Act on our website. It really is a long-term thing, but it references the civil code. It gives you more information to be able to go back and say, per the civil code, wait a second, what's this? So educate yourself before you say they can't do it. So
great. With that, gang, hopefully that you have enjoyed this particular session of con-dos and con-don'ts. We would like to thank our distinguished panel, Bruce Slaton, Brandi Schaefer, Brad Higgins. By the way, the panel is better known as the Better Business Buying Group. So, so with that, again, let's give them a round of applause. Make sure that if you want to see either one of the panelists, get their emails or information, they are up here for your information. Thank you very much. See you at the next one.